My name is Marcos Breton. I'm the California opinion editor for the Sacramento Bee, and I want to thank you both for joining us. So why don't we have opening statements from each candidate for 3 minutes, and let's start with Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you. I am a very long-term attorney, 40 years, and I've done a lot of different types of practice, all centered around the criminal justice system. I early on was in private practice where I did criminal cases and worked with a former district attorney in Southern California. I was partnered with him on a lot of cases, misdemeanors and felonies. That got my feet wet. I was a public defender then for about 10 or 12 years. I had 3 different positions as a Solano County public defender, Orange County public defender, and then also as a state public defender doing serious felony and death penalty appeals. I then worked for the Department of Corrections for 3 years in their employment law unit, doing some really significant employment law cases that a couple of which have become precedential, as well as doing discipline cases at each of the prisons. I've been to most of the prisons, 90% of them, and done multi-day hearings, put on a lot of evidence, and worked with a lot of different correctional officers who assisted in forming cases for criminal as well as just misconduct behavior in both staff and peace officers. I worked at the CalPERS for 5 years after that as a senior litigator and as the litigation lead for several years. And after that, I left and went to the California State Department of Mental Health, where for 8 years I was the general counsel and also the deputy director of the forensic unit, which did a lot of work with sexually violent predators and getting their reports in on a timely basis so that even if a district attorney's office was late in requesting the reports that would hold them in custody, we never had a single person released for failure to get a report, even when we only had 1 or 2 days of time to get those reports, which was a very difficult and governor attention position to be in, because they didn't, of course, want there to be predators who had to be set free if they needed to be in custody. And after that, I went back to CalPERS. I did a lot of administrative work, worked with the board, very contentious board there, Willie Brown and a lot of other well-known folks who have very strong opinions. And it was a pleasure to work with them and to learn about working closely with the board. I also did a lot of training for other attorneys during that period of time, did a lot of training when I was the general counsel at the Department of Mental Health. And since then, since I left that job, I've been doing a private practice at home. My bent has always been to make sure that that justice is not just who we incarcerate, but who we don't incarcerate. And if people are safer with somebody going to an education or diversion program, that is the proper way to deal with people who get into the criminal world, but not yet into the cycle, and therefore can be better handled. I think the compassion shown towards the victims is also better spent when we show compassion towards people who need to be brought back to the fold so they don't cause more harm. And that is a DA's job.
Thank you. And now we'll have 3 minutes from Mr. Reisig.
Great, thank you. So my name is Jeff Reisig, and I am the DA in Yolo County right now. I'm starting my 16th year. And prior to that, I served 10 years as a deputy DA, so almost 26 years as a prosecutor here in Yolo County. I did have a brief stint in private practice before, but my career has been right here handling criminal cases. And during that period of time, the 20 going on 26 years, I've handled everything you can imagine, from serial murders to rapes to robberies to gang injunctions to DUI and theft and everything in between. And it's important for the DA to have experience, this kind of experience, obviously, because we're handling a lot of criminal cases from all over the county. 7,000 a year come into Yolo despite our small size. I've got 30 deputy DAs that I supervise, train, and mentor. And I think they really value my experience as I help shepherd all the cases through these days. So I think it's also worth mentioning that I'm currently the president of the California District Attorneys Association, which represents most of the DAs in California, from San Diego and Santa Barbara to Modoc and Lassen and Shasta and almost everywhere in between. And the reason that's relevant is they elected me the president of the DAs Association because, and these are people from all sides of the aisle. I mean, this is let's say a bipartisan collection of DAs. And They trust me. They respect me. I've been doing the job a long time. And in particular, one of the things that I've really focused on the last few years, other than just keeping Yolo County safe and focusing on violent crime, but I've also been focused on what I like to call smart reforms and doing things that bridge the gap between the extremes. And there's so much room to maneuver within that gap. And whether it's things like the transparency portal that I launched first in the nation last year with Measures for Justice, I now have my colleagues around the state following my lead on that. I'm actually co-sponsor of a bill. It's actually AB 2418, authored by CALRA, and I'm a sponsor. And my co-sponsor, by the way, is the ACLU. So it's not too often that you hear the story of the president of CDAA and the ACLU coming together on a bill like this. But I believe in transparency, and my colleagues trust me, and they're following me on it. They've endorsed the bill. I also was first in the nation to do a race-blind charging program in partnership with Stanford. They built it. I then built it into my case management system, which put it into the DNA of my office. And that was a first. Nobody's ever put it into their office like that. Well, my colleagues think it's a good idea, both sides of the aisle. They endorsed the bill that I'm backing with Assemblymember McCarty. That's 2778. My co-sponsor is the Attorney General, Rob Bonta. And so, these are just a small sampling of things that I've been focused on as the DA, both at home and looking big picture, what can I do to help shift the needle in California to stuff that I think is much more effective and right down the middle.
All right, thank you both. So we will begin the questioning, and why don't we begin with our colleague, Yusuf Bey.
Yeah, guys, I think it'd be good just to kind of start, obviously, within Yolo County and the community you guys would be serving if elected. Obviously, you both have been on the campaign trail for months now, and I'm curious, what issues you are hearing are most important to Yolo County voters right now. And I ask this question mostly because, in Sacramento County, we have very different realities here with gun violence, mass shootings proliferating. And that's often taken a big piece of the conversation, homelessness as well, and the spillover effects of that. So I want to get a sense just to kind of have this conversation grounded in what's going on in Yolo specifically and what you guys are hearing from constituents. And Mr. Reisig, let's start with you.
Great. Well, I've been out walking precincts in every city. I've talked to hundreds of people. And what I'm hearing is two things really primarily. First, there's a lot of concern about violent crime because, what happens in Sacramento, we all hear about it. It's our news cycle. It's our news center. And so people are afraid of the increase in the shootings, the ghost guns, the gang activity, and they want to know that I'm going to continue to tackle that and that I have the experience and the chops basically to handle the job. And so I'm hearing that across the board from everybody, that they want to make sure that we're not so engaged in criminal justice reform that we're not focused on this primary goal of keeping our communities and our kids safe. But the other thing that I hear everywhere is the homelessness crisis. And people, I walked West Sacramento on Sunday and I had that conversation a dozen times. And everybody wants to know, what are we doing about it? Why is it so bad? It's just terrible. I'm afraid my kids can't go to the park. There's needles over here. And it's a legitimate concern. We all know it's an epidemic. It's a humanitarian crisis. And so what I tell them is I'm totally focused on it. Here in Yolo, I've been doing lots of programs with mental health diversion and addiction because I recognize that we've got to get these people into treatment. We've got to get them help. Otherwise, they're going to just keep cycling through the system, and many of them end up on the street. The big thing that I've been engaged in is a bill, again, with Assemblymember McCarty, who's been my partner on this. He authored it. It was 1542 last year. We made it all the way to the governor, and he vetoed it because he didn't like the coerced treatment. And then he came out with Care Court, which is about coerced treatment. And so I love it. I love Care Court. And so we're back this year with AB 1928. McCarty is the author. We now call it Hope California. And it's 100% focused on creating incentivized, secured drug treatment options for people who want to choose that when they've been convicted of a felony. So, those are the big issues, and those are my answers to people.
And Cynthia, same thing to you. And I would also ask, are you as well also hearing that gun violence and homelessness are top of mind for your voters? And, and do you have a position on Care Court as well within that?
Thank you. I have been hearing as I walk the district, which I've been doing for about 4.5 months now, a lot about mental health everybody knows somebody who has had a mental health crisis or a mental health decline, and people want to know why this or that relative is in custody when it's clear that they have emotional problems and could need, help instead of this hard time. And they're very concerned about, if they have that kind of program in their home, what happens when they call the police and the reaction is some sort of escalation of the incident as opposed to a de-escalation. I also hear a lot about racial injustice. A lot of families in Yolo County are really concerned about the size of the Black and Hispanic and indigenous populations in our jails, and that it hasn't changed, and that finally, after 16 years and admitting it a year ago, that is a completely overrepresented minority. Those are overrepresented minorities in custody. There still has been no address over what's going to happen, except this blind charging idea, which for one problem does not address anything if the problem is not within the DA's office itself. And the horror of that is, if it is the DA's office itself that is creating an imbalance by how they've been charging, then why hasn't the DA actually done something about that? Why hasn't he confronted the DAs who were charging deputies when these things got out of proportion? And why hasn't he told us what the result was and how he's going to deal with that problem? So blind charging is a fine thing to do, but it only addresses if your own deputies are the ones who are charging with bias. So other than that, it doesn't do anything about a problem of racial inequality and overrepresentation of minorities in custody. I have also heard about the homelessness problem, but mostly what I've heard is that Mr. Reisig has not addressed it. He has not successfully addressed it in 16 years. And why should he be given more opportunities to figure out what he hasn't figured out yet? In 16 years in office, it has grown and grown and grown to the size where now we have basically favelas on the hill, people building wooden structures to live in because they cannot find a way to be housed. Housing is the answer to homelessness. I learned in mental health, my almost decade there, that without shelter, you can't even begin to address the problems that have caused people to become homeless, whether it is loss of work, loss of stability, mental health, drug and alcohol addiction. All those things have to start with housing, so that there's some place to put your medicine under your pillow and to collect whatever kind of Medicare or other items that you're eligible in order to gain stability. And without that, there is no point to trying to help them. The program that he's had, the carefully written 5-point program, which only offers incarceration, is not the way to do it, nor is programming that's only offered when you're in custody. Where has the work been putting programs outside of custody? We have no community-based programs. We have zero low or no cost inpatient rehabilitation programs for poor people or anybody without full medical coverage. That we used to have those programs. We used to have drop-in programs. All those programs are gone now in Yolo County because the DAs and the county hasn't been told how hard they have to work to secure those programs. Those programs are what keep from creating new victims of crime caused by addiction that's not resolved because it's not taken care of until somebody's in custody for a long haul. There's a lot of crimes before the long haul crimes among drug offenders, mental health people, etc. And those things need to be addressed. And we have not had enough attention to those. And those are the way we keep people safe. This isn't just about the problems of the people who have drug and alcohol problems. This isn't about the less than 10% diversion that Reisig has offered from his way he's practiced DA in his time. This is about, we cannot make people safe if we don't address the problems of the people. And that comes from diversion, from education, from treatment, from all the ways that we, pardon?
Thank you very much. We'll continue the conversation. Okay. So go ahead, Yusuf.
Well, I mean, obviously, those are some pretty pointed criticisms. I want to give Jeff an opportunity to respond for 2 minutes, and specifically on what Cynthia was saying, that race-blind charging doesn't necessarily address the systemic issues within the criminal justice system and mass incarceration, and then on homelessness, that forced treatment or anything along those lines maybe avoids a housing-first approach that others feel is better for homelessness.
Great. Well, on the first issue with the disparity in the criminal justice system, it's a fact. And we look at the data across California, and we know that there is a huge disparity of people of color in jails and prisons compared to the population. And unfortunately, it's enhanced. It's even worse in places. The number one, when I looked at the data last, the worst in California was San Francisco, and then Marin, and then Solano, and then Yolo. There is a phenomenon that clearly is driving something out of the Bay Area. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's a fact that the disparity exists. It exists in Sacramento as well. So why did I target race-blind charging as my solution? Because that's my purview. I am the DA, and the first time I see a criminal case is when the case is sent to me by the police officers. It's the only time in the entire proceeding where a decision can truly be made blindly on race. And it's also the most critical stage of the proceeding, as deemed by our case law, the critical decision. And so what I looked at was a couple things. First of all, I've been tackling implicit bias since 2016 when I went to the White House and heard a speech from the president of the Black Lawyers Association of America tell me that she suffered from implicit bias when she would charge cases. I came back, we instituted training for all my team. We were the first in California to do it in partnership with the Museum of Tolerance. And ever since then, I've been trying to figure out how can I attack this issue systemically in the DA's office. And that's where race-blind charging came in. And so I was able to work with Stanford, as you know, to make that happen. And I think it is a model, clearly it's a model that has merit because the Attorney General is with me on it and we're going to promote it around California. Does it solve all the problems? Absolutely not, but it's the right start. And I know I've got seconds to go here. On the mandatory treatment, the forced treatment, I would just say this. The governor agrees with us, and I agree with the governor. What we're doing has not been working, and it's time to try something new and humane, and this is it.
This is something that we also struggled with when we were talking to the Sacramento County DA race candidates, which is to say that the DA's purview is pretty thin. And there's a lot of talk about programs that need to happen before and interventions that need to happen before. And Cynthia, you were talking about how Yolo used to have these programs. But as the DA, do you really feel like that is something that you're capable of doing? That's something within your power to do, to institute these programs for youth or for repeat offenders or for any of the sort of root causes that may eventually land on your desk? The DA's cause is to prosecute. So what do you feel like is realistically a program that you could institute in the next 2 years that would make change? And I guess let's start with Cynthia on this.
That's a great question. I think that one of the things we have to really keep our eye on is that the DA's office is a leadership office. It's not just a marching office. It's a decision-making, prioritizing office that's the head law enforcement officer. And we have to work with other agencies, in particular with those who can conduct programs like this, social services, mental health, all the programs that are able to put things together and execute them in the county. And one of the orders to the DA is to determine what is the basis of crime in our county and how can it be reduced. So it's not just about prosecution all day long. We also have to be aware of the information, where the statistics are leading us to. So when someone says I can only do things about what's sent to my office, that's actually not correct. You can do a lot of things about figuring out why these charges are happening this way. I don't think just saying, well, everybody's got more people of color in jail, so that's obviously not my fault and nothing to do with what's going on here. I don't think we can rest on our laurels that way. I think that we know that there is a history of bias issues in our country, and we all have to be responsible for determining if something's going on in our county that's contributing to that. So we need to be aware of what's coming to us from the police officers. We need to be talking with our partners, the chiefs, the other programs, and be aware of how that's coming in. We need to be responsible for what the county's actions are. We can't just say, well, this is all I know about, and I'm doing my best with my guys. Because, for example, if you were just doing your best with your guys, then why wouldn't you have already figured out who is charging at inappropriate rates? Why would you need blind charging if you've looked at it and everything your deputies were putting through exactly correlated with what was coming in from police departments? We have 10 times more Black people. Well, guess what? We have 10 times more Black people reports coming in from the police agencies. And why do they have those? Are we looking at where they're policing, where they're doing spending most of their time, what's happening there? If they're charging the same rate of different people for crimes that, for example, pot smoking. We know that occurs among all colors of people. Are we charging anybody who's of a white race or Asian, or are we only charging Black people? I'm just using that as an example, not because I know of some statistic there, but I'm just saying that's the kind of information a DA could give to us, could determine, that would give us confidence in the integrity of how this charging is happening. And we are not given that. We've got these blind statistics that come through, and look at my website, look at my website, look at my website. When I look at the website, it shows that Black people are being arrested more than white people, that white people's charges are being dropped more than Black people's charges. There is no information there. There is no analysis. Other offices do analysis of the information coming in, and we don't have that. So I think there's a lot you can do. You set the tone, you prioritize what you do with your funding. I mean, Mr. Reisig likes to tout all day long about these different programs, but actually the issue is, how many people does he get in them? 2,000 people over 16 years is 200 people a year.
Thank you.
Jeff, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thanks, Robin. So, look, homelessness is a crisis that affects the entire state. I don't need to tell you that, whether it's Yolo, Sacramento, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Orange County. This is, as I said, it's a humanitarian crisis. It's everywhere. So this isn't something that I created in Yolo with, through bad prosecution practices. It's something we're all struggling with to find answers, including the governor. So what have I done to address it? Well, look, for 10 years, I've actually been looking for ways. Before the homelessness crisis even exploded, I was looking for ways to get people out of the criminal justice system. And that was the restorative justice program, which has diverted thousands of people, including many felons, out. Well, later, and not too long after that, I started mental health court and addiction intervention court and other drug diversion programs, with the idea that if we can get people well, get them treatment before they're convicted and sent off to jail or prison, that's a much better investment of time. And my programs, there's public reports, you can research it. They were independently researched. Thousands of people have gone through all of those types of programs and have been helped. But I don't have any illusions that my 5-point plan to reduce homelessness is going to solve our state's problem. What it is, it's a starting point. I drafted it up a few years ago based on my experience, both professionally and personally, having a family member that's homeless on the streets of Sacramento for 10 years now. And I think it hits the relevant points. And if you look at the plan, and I do reference people to my plan because I put a lot of thought into it, we are tackling that. We are getting people into treatment in Yolo. We are diverting as many people as we can early on. I am not the Health and Human Services Director at the same time. It's not within my purview to decide that Yolo County is going to dedicate $100 million to all this front end stuff. That's the Board of Supervisors. I support my Health and Human Services department head. We work together collaboratively. All of the programs I've told you about are our collaboration. But I think you're spot on to say that, the DA has a unique role, and that's primarily on considering cases for public safety purposes, whether it's a crime or not, certainly taking care of victims, looking for opportunities to divert people, looking for ways to smartly improve the system. That's all I've been doing my entire career. And I think I'm getting better at it, but we'll see what the voters say.
I'd like to ask each candidate a question that's specific to their candidacy, and I'd like to begin with Ms. Rodriguez. How did you come to the decision to run for DA at this stage of your career? Were you encouraged to do so by members of the community? How long did you consider this decision, and ultimately, who were the people who played a role in helping you decide that you would run for DA? And I'll give you 3 minutes for that, please.
I would say that I have always been interested, primarily in my career, my passion has been criminal justice and having it done the right way, so that when people are injured or worse yet, killed, that we find perpetrators, and that when perpetrators are convicted, it's for the right thing and it's the right person. So I was approached, I've been thinking about it for more than a year before I began running, which was like this weekend was 1 year ago that I began running. So for about a year beforehand, I had left the state and was doing a private practice, and I thought about 2 different main issues I was thinking of going into, and one of them was this. I was approached by a lot of people and encouraged, particularly people in the Democratic Party, because I was an active Yolo County Central Committee meeting member, and I started a club here in Winters that I was president of for 20 years. And so as part of that group, a lot of people encouraged me to do this. They knew about my lifelong devotion to criminal justice issues and to assisting people who had been either injured or had needed to have a return to community. And the reason I undertook it is because I had seen a lot of things going on in Yolo County that I was not impressed by. The lack of programs, the very, very small diversion programs. When we talk about diversion programs, there's less than 200 people a year over the years that are getting into it. He says 1,000, but we're talking about, 16 years. So it's a small number, particularly compared to other counties, which have much larger number. And it's the mental health court 2 years ago, I think it was 2021, there were 20 people admitted to that. Another year, there were 9 people admitted to that. The people getting through his mental health programs is very, very minute compared to the thousands of people who suffer. And the 7,000 reportedly he brought in every year, a large number of those people have mental illness, and there is no energy or devotion put towards fixing their problem, instead of putting them in a very inhuman system that does not recognize treatment or the need for treatment. And they therefore come back to the county more dangerous than ever before. So when I decided to do this, I had gone to a speech that Mr. Reisig gave here in Winters at a local bank to a Winters group, Democracy Winters, I think it was called. I'm not a member of it, but I had heard he was coming. And I heard him say how, yes, it was true that like 68% of the people had voted for Prop 47 and 61 for Prop 57, but he was still against it many, many years later, and he was still filing lawsuits against it because the people were just wrong. And I just thought how amazingly, I'm sorry to use the term, but arrogant it was to say that he knew more than people knew. They were wrong, and he was going to fix that. He was going to use their money to sue against the interest of the majority of the voters of Yolo County. And that was another thing that stirred me to feeling no office should be run in that way, as if the office holder knows more than the voters.
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. And for Mr. Reisig, you have been the DA for some time, this 16 years, I believe. What compels you to run again? And first of all, what compels you to run again? And how do you think that you have evolved as a prosecutor in those times? When I first became the columnist for the Sacramento Bee, when I first came in contact with you, your reputation was, whether it was fair or not, was that you were kind of a hard-nosed, kind of more leaning conservative prosecutor. Would you say that was a fair assessment? And how would you say you've evolved over those years? And 3 minutes for that one, please.
Yeah, well, I'll start at the beginning within my 3-minute time limit. When I first became a prosecutor in 1997, it was a different time in California. And I've told this story to many people. Prosecutors across California were taught that criminals were nails and we were the hammers. And hammer away, and that was the tough on crime rhetoric and the teaching that was endemic throughout DAs across California. And so I certainly was raised in a time as a young prosecutor where we were going after violent crime. We had 3 strikes. It seemed like every year we had new enhancements that the legislature was passing to enhance the prison sentences. So, when I got elected DA, which was in 2006, there was a definite shift going on, and my eyes were open to it in a lot of different ways. And what I have come to really appreciate now is I'm a totally different person today than I was, 26 years ago. And I've had so much time to see the system evolve, and I've seen policy failures. I've seen policies succeed, and I've seen policies fail. And I've seen where we can kind of skirt the middle and do a good job and not get lost in the rhetoric of the extremes. And so as I sit here today, I would say that, I am informed by 25 plus years of watching the system swing back and forth, watching policies come into play that had good intentions, but had minor, in some case, minor deficiencies and major deficiencies. And I felt compelled to do my part to try and fix things. And I've said this all along. I'm not an ideologue. I don't consider myself far left or far right. I'm very much down the middle. I think that's why my colleagues across California elected me president. I'm very much in the middle. And I think that's where most of the answers to our most pressing problems are right now with criminal justice reform. And so going all the way back a decade ago when I started that restorative justice program and all my colleagues thought I was some crazy hippie, I said, no, I believe in this. I think this will have a better outcome. And it did. We've had it independently audited. Recidivism rates are 4% after 1 year, less than 20% after 3 years. Same thing for mental health court. Same thing for the addiction intervention court. I think it's going to be the same thing for transparency and race blind. And so, to get to the second part of the question, why am I running? Because my work's not done. We just started a lot of this major reform, and to be able to have this opportunity and time to work with the Attorney General Bonta, to work with lawmakers, and to fix things that are broken in the criminal justice system, and use my experience and to use my tenure, I'm excited about it. I'm also, make no mistake, 100% committed to keeping Yolo County safe. I've got two young kids at home, and I'm concerned every day about making sure that it's a safe environment for all of my constituents, my friends, my family, and my kids. And so that's what drives me.
We'll go back to you, Seth.
I want to touch on something that Cynthia just raised in her response. And Jeff, obviously you've instituted a lot of reforms, and our board has been complimentary of them at times, and they've gotten coverage in headlines across the region and even in some national publications. But it sounds like to Cynthia and folks who may be backing her candidacy and that she's having conversations with during this campaign that they feel like they're maybe not effective enough or producing results that are discernible to a public that's maybe looking for something a bit more dramatic. I mean, how would you respond to those criticisms, coming from some folks in the community that the reforms you have instituted, while they sound good and they could lead to change long term, they maybe aren't as effective right now as people are wanting them to be?
So I would just start off by saying, with all due respect to Ms. Rodriguez, in 25 years of working in the courthouse and being the DA, I never saw her. I never heard her name. I don't think she ever practiced in Yolo. So I don't think, when she made the decision to run for DA, it kind of caught me by surprise because I had no idea who she was. And it's relevant because she hasn't seen what's been going on the ground in Yolo County in our courts. And there's a reason why we get coverage from the Bee and national media about our successful programs, whether it's mental health court or restorative justice or race blind, because it's big news. And so, what I would say is that all of these programs have actually been analyzed by, not me, by independent groups that looked at our success rate, that published reports, whether it was Colorado State that published it on the restorative justice program. The county has put out stuff on mental health court that shows how incredibly successful that is. So I don't think that anybody can legitimately look at the programs that we are running and say that they are not effective. If somebody wants to say that we should be doing more, I would say, I agree. And that's why we're constantly trying to expand these programs and create more paths for people to get help instead of going to prison, like Hope Yolo, AB 1542, and now AB 1928. That's a local program. So I'm absolutely committed to expanding the opportunities, but we're also bound by reality here. And the reality is we all have fiscal constraints. I'm not the Health and Human Services Department. I'm the DA. And hey, this program that I'm trying to do with McCarty, we support it absolutely, but some of our folks in Health and Human Services do not. And so, there's that rub that I am not the expert in the field, but I certainly am committed to pursuing expansions of programs that work. And again, I know Ms. Rodriguez likes to attack my programs and say they're too little, they're too late, they're too whatever. And I would just say the proof's in the pudding. Look at the data. I don't, write this stuff out and put it out, in press releases. It's out there because independent people have looked at it. And I just keep encouraging voters to do their homework.
Cynthia, and to maybe put the question in a different way to you, I mean, what specific programs or proposals do you have to maybe address the gaps that you believe Mr. Reisig is not hitting with his policies, or what specific things can you point to that if you were elected, you would institute to achieve the reforms that you feel like the public is looking for?
Well, first of all, I just note that everybody's aware of the fact that a budget is really just a system of priorities. And if you have your budget, as Mr. Reisig has often told people, keeping him in Sacramento every day, he's often stated to audiences I've been with him at, I go to Sacramento every day. I go across the state. I go across the nation, teaching people how to prosecute, all these other things. You know, his orientation is towards what he can do for other counties. What we need is what he can do for Yolo County. Yolo County does not prioritize creating new systems, new diversion track systems. And one of the things that when I've talked to people in other counties about that they're shocked about is the fact that he does not do the statutory diversion programs that are offered. So for example, he builds a huge reconciliation neighborhood court, etc. And then half the people he puts in it from the beginning are drunk in public or petty theft. There are authorized statutory diversion programs for petty theft that don't require an entire system to be built up around them. And every single person who has a no prior petty theft can be in it. There's just no reason not to be. So why wouldn't we use the wheel that's already invented as opposed to his creating this program essentially out of whole cloth when one already exists that's easy to access and would serve everybody who got it, who was in a position to be compliant with the requirements. And he doesn't do those programs. There are programs for people with intellectual disabilities, people with physical disabilities, veterans, people with, you know, they're just so many statutory diversion programs that Mr. Reisig takes no advantage of, and that our population in Yolo County is not entitled to. Ask your DA what kind of programs they have in Sacramento, because they have all those statutory diversion programs. We don't have them here. Our children, our youth, our first offenders don't have the opportunity to take advantage of them because of the way he runs his courthouse. The system he is proposing, 1542 and 1928, he and Mr. McCarty, is a program that Human Rights Watch has called injurious. It's not a good program. It's a bad idea. It's coercive, it's negative, and it only helps people who can be sentenced to a year or two in custody. So early people who have the easiest to address problems, short-lived problems, don't have anywhere to go. And so his excitement about those programs would be great if he'd done anything for other people. So for example, they don't even have AA in the jail. They don't have anything there. Why not focus on those levels? Why not, as the lead law enforcement officer, talk with all these police agencies about bringing in some of those things that would be crucial? In addition, when you look at the data, you know, he keeps telling us, look at the data, look at the numbers. Why doesn't he tell us the numbers? What are the numbers that would show that he's done more than less than 10% diversion over the last 16 years he's been in office? The numbers would show he has not done very much diversion at all. Zero.
Jeff, want to give you a minute to respond to that, and specifically the point she was making about who is actually getting into these diversion programs and the criticism she had of the bills that you're backing right now.
Yeah, I'll just start again by, you know, with a basic observation that she doesn't know what she doesn't know. She shows up a year ago and claims to have all this data on our diversion programs. Statutory diversion programs are things that I have been using ever since I became the DA. I've said this publicly and I'll stand by it. Yolo County is one of the most aggressive diverting counties in the entire state. I tell my colleagues what we're doing and they're amazed at the programs that we have available. That's not a new creation. I've been doing that for years, whether it's PC 1000 or misdemeanor diversion. I mean, I talk a lot about the restorative justice and the mental health and the addiction intervention. We have 5 other diversion programs that have been operating for years. So she doesn't know what she doesn't know. And it sounds good when she makes the attack, I guess, but she also hasn't done her homework on the stats, the stuff that actually is out there that shows the success rate. And I'll just pick one, the mental health court. It was independently looked at and it found a 97% reduction in arrests for the individuals that are in the mental health court. Now, yeah, that's a court that has 30 people in one segment, 30 people in another segment, and it's an 18-month program. We are constrained by resources. That's something that I've been trying to work on with Health and Human Services to grow the program. But nonetheless, the program is incredibly successful. Same thing with the restorative justice program. Thousands.
I would like to ask for an opportunity to respond. This is a second.
Yeah, Cynthia, a minute to you to respond, and then we'll go to the next question.
Okay, so Mr. Reisig has this empty thing where he says, "I don't know what I don't know." Well, that doesn't say anything. There's no response to say something like that. I know what he's doing in this county. You know, I am aware of all the policies he's put in place. I talk with a lot of lawyers here. I've been in the upper echelon of the state legal system for the last 25 years. So his continued, you know, he who has never been in federal court or operated in many other courtrooms that, as I have, done statewide work, reported to the governor and the legislature. You know, his cry that I don't know what I'm talking about and that I haven't appeared here, first of all, it's not true. And second of all, is ridiculous. And when he says that he has a 97% reduction in those people who were included, that says nothing about how few people were included and how many people are going to state prison because of their mental illness, or Mr. Pape died because of his mental illness and his flailing in a hospital during a panic attack, that he charged him, Mr. Reisig charged him with a felony for flailing on a hospital bed and striking a technician while he was flailing. And he ended up killing himself when they wouldn't bring it down from a felony. You know, there are a lot of things going on that Mr. Reisig is not acknowledging. He comes up with these numbers that make no sense. If you actually look at the data, the statewide data shows that we do less diversion here than the statewide average, less diversion here than most of our surrounding and like counties do. And it's in the statewide data. I've consulted that many times. You can find it there, the state records of diversion.
So I want to stay on a point that has come up a couple of times, and I'll start with Mr. Reisig. So you clearly have a set of critics, and I think Ms. Rodriguez made reference to the Democratic Club of Yolo County and the leadership there. Certainly Carlos Alcala, Maria Grijalva, people like that clearly have been longtime critics of yours. Going back a decade, when there was a curfew in West Sacramento and a policy that was seen as draconian, and people still remember that. Can you address the specific criticism that is made against you by the Democratic Club of Sacramento? And when you reflect on the curfew that was in place in West Sac, 10 years hence, would you do it again if faced with the same circumstances? And Mr. Russell, we'll give you 3 minutes.
Just start with this whole partisan thing and that she's backed by the Democratic Central Committee. That's fine. I mean, this is a nonpartisan race under the Constitution. The DA shall be nonpartisan. And I've really tried to honor that. And I think if you look at my supporters, whether it's my colleagues or right here in Yolo, I mean, 4 out of the 5 supervisors endorse me. They're all Democrats. Senator Bill Dodd, Democrat, endorses me. Senator Lois Wolk, Democrat, endorses me. Helen Thompson, formerly Assembly member. I could go on and on and on. My point is, I have just a wide swath of very distinguished, reputable Democrats that support me in this nonpartisan race. Partisan politics should have nothing to do with this. But to your second question about the criticism on the injunction, you were in the Bee when we first pursued it, and I remember you writing about it. And there's a couple things to note. First, was it successful? From a pure data standpoint, it was. Violent crime reduced during the period that the injunction, which was a court order, by the way, it's not something that I drafted and just implemented. It was a judge conducted a 9-month trial and took evidence from hundreds of victims and witnesses from Broderick that came in and told their story about being victimized by the gang. And then that judge, Judge Kathy White, issued the 7-year injunction. It reduced crime during the period of its implementation, and fewer young adults went to prison. I understand the criticism. I understood it then. I understand it now. Would I do it again? No, because we've evolved out of that period of time. When we first sought that injunction, they were all over, LA and Orange County and San Diego. There were some in the Bay Area. It seemed like a reasonable tool in light of a very violent, deadly situation in Sacramento. But now, with so many things, we have the benefit of hindsight. It was a tool that was probably heavy-handed, and I wouldn't do it again necessarily. But I understand the criticism. What I say to those people is, look at what we've done. I mean, if you can't even acknowledge that fewer people went to prison and violent crime went down, are you being honest about it? And then second of all, look at where we've come since then.
If elected to this role, what would be, how would you orient yourself, and how would you work in an office that has worked under Mr. Reisig for 16 years, would you make wholesale changes of the leadership? And how difficult would it be for you to be effective in stepping into an office that when you haven't been a prosecutor either in Yolo County or any place else in California? How effective could you be in running an office where you, in some ways, you would be meeting your colleagues for the first time on day one of your job? And we'll give 3 minutes for that, please.
Well, luckily, that's another thing that I don't have to enter unprepared. I've taken over offices before, management of law offices as well as non-law offices in which someone else, for example, at mental health, the fellow who had been acting chief general counsel for 2 years remained on staff after I was appointed general counsel. And of course, he wasn't thrilled to have somebody replace him who was actually getting the salary of that job and who had not been a part of it for 25 years as he had. But we developed a great working relationship. I acknowledged his strengths. He acknowledged mine. I thanked him for his work, continuously pointing out to himself and others, where he was doing great things and where his leadership was invaluable. And I think that is not a system. That's just what works with human beings in general. So I don't have any fears about entering it off. And I also entered the other attorneys in the office. A couple of them had vied for the same position. So I'm aware of people's capacity to be, uncomfortable and to be, jealous or angry or whatever it is they are. But I also think people work in response to what you offer them. And if you offer them respect and appreciation and a good job and a good, meaningful position in which they can be well thought of, their integrity will win out. Most people that we know in the workplace are not there to, dog each other. They're there to get something important done. They have an idea of what needs to be done in the workplace. I try to create a workplace where I would want to work. So in my last job that I was a manager, after 9 years, I had a ranking of 97% of the people there felt that they were doing meaningful and well appreciated work. And that's what I strive to create. So yes, I do think if there are people who can't work with the system that I bring in, then they can move on. This is an area where there are jobs everywhere. There are DA jobs, there are county and state agency jobs. They will be able to find other work. And I've also found that happens. No matter how hard you work to bring people into the fold, some people just don't want to change, so they go elsewhere. I know a lot of great attorneys who would love to have a position like this and who do excellent work. So I don't have any illusions of everybody wanting to fall in line with a change in programming. But I do know that I can, hard work wins the day in this kind of a situation, and I will do that hard work. So I don't have any doubts we'll be able to get it on yet with new staff. And if we can't, if the old staff remains, then they will either do what they need to do, or they'll have to explain why they're not doing what's required of them. I also would just like, for just a moment, to address the question that you gave to Mr. Reisig. And I think we have to remember that Mr. Reisig's actions in that being in West Sacramento hurt families and traumatized the community. And there has been no attention paid to the trauma there or what needs to be done to take care of it. No attention paid to all the youth who have had no time to grow up. Instead, we're part of, it only ended 4 years ago. So acting like it was deeply in the past is a bad idea. And it's a bad public face for people who suffered greatly through that arena.
Yeah, thank you. We'll go to Robin Hepley.
So this race has become quite heated. And I think that's evidenced by some of the conversation that we've had here today. So I have a question for each of you, and I want to start with Jeff here. Cynthia brought this up a few minutes ago, the suicide of Eric Pape after he was charged with multiple felony charges. There are some who criticize that, saying that Eric needed help, not a felony charge. And his mother claims that that is what, the stress of the trial is what led to his suicide. So Jeff, I wanted to give you a few moments to explain why those charges went ahead, how, if you feel that situation could have been handled any differently, and why you decided to pursue those charges.
I'm really glad you asked me about that case because it brings up a lot of issues that often come up in these cases involving the seriously mentally ill. And the most significant thing involving Mr. Pape was, when he was charged, I mean, it was a felony charge at the time based on a serious injury to an individual, a treatment provider in the hospital. So the Davis police made the arrest. They did their job. They sent it over. We looked at it, and we, under the charging standard, believed that it was a felony charge. The problem and the fundamental failure in the system is that, and you might be surprised by what I'm going to tell you, is that nobody in the system, not the defense attorney who was representing Mr. Pape, not the judge, not the DA, took on the mental health issues that he obviously had in those first appearances. So what I mean by that is, with our mental health program, the defense attorney has to make a referral of the individual to the mental health assessment team to see whether or not they would truly benefit from the treatment. And that simply did not happen. So I know that they like to point the finger at the DA, and I understand it's a tragedy. I mean, I'm very, very sorry that he died, and I feel terrible for his mother. But it started with the public defender taking it seriously, coming to the judge and the DA and saying, this guy is really mentally ill. We need to do something. That didn't happen. Instead, what happened is the public defender got him released, and then he killed himself. And so I understand the facts are salacious in the sense that it makes for good finger pointing and blaming me. And what I'm telling you is that I own the fact that the system failed him at that first appearance. And that's why we have the system now where we have an assessment team. And it's actually the DA, the public defender, the court, the probation office, and Health and Human Services. And when these pop up on the radar now, we're all working aggressively to get people the help they need. And the most critical fact I need to tell you about that, in all the years that we've been running this program, since we started the mental health court, the DA has only disagreed on one occasion. One. And so, it was a tragic case, and I feel terrible for the mother, but the blame goes all the way around.
So I just want to confirm before we move on, Jeff, you're saying that your office did not know at all about Eric's mental health issues until after he killed himself.
No, I think what I'm saying is that there was discussion about the mental health issues. Clearly, I think it was evident from the officer when they arrested him that he was suffering a mental condition. What I'm telling you is that when he first arrived in court, it really is incumbent upon the public defender, it's his attorney, to talk with him and aggressively try and get him into a mental health treatment path. And instead, what they did is they got him out of custody. Now, the criticism is that, well, why didn't the DA just drop the felony charges at that point? Once you knew that he was mentally ill, why wouldn't you just drop the charges? Well, we still have to have a system of accountability. And so while the ultimate path for Mr. Pape probably would have been, he would have gone into treatment program somewhere down the line, it should have happened a lot sooner. And what I'm saying is that there was a fundamental failure. And I've told the public defender this. I've told her, you failed here. And we should have been talking and identifying this guy's situation at that very first court appearance. And that didn't happen. And so, I own my part in that, but I'm not going to sit back and just say that there wasn't a fundamental failure on the public defender side. There was. They didn't make the case for him. They just didn't.
Okay, thank you. Cynthia, to you, I wanted to ask you, there's been some ads run by your opponent that accuses you of being soft on crime were you to win the seat. And in particular, one ad asserts that you received thousands of dollars in campaign funding from convicted sex offenders and a child rapist, and specifically talking about Sanjay Dev and Brett Predoria. And so I wanted to give you the opportunity to address that campaign attack on you and talk a little bit about why you accepted that money, what you've done with that money, and why you accepted it in the first place.
Yeah, I find there's a real distraction from the significant issues of this campaign. And I think we're both serious attorneys, and so I've been vetted and approved of and appointed by 2 governors. So the idea that I'm involved with child molesters and rapists is ridiculous, and an embarrassment to the campaign that someone's making hay out of it. As I've stated many times before, when Mr. Reisig sort of obliquely mentioned this issue, we, without giving any information, as might have been much more appropriate to explain what he was talking about, we looked at the rolls and we found a person who appeared to be on a registry, and we gave him back. We gave him back. He had made a donation that day, which we just bounced back. We refused it, and everything we had taken from him we gave to Empower Yolo. So we have had no monies from that person since the weekend that this was charged. And his allegation that somehow I should have the kinds of funds or capacity to run the name of everybody who, the 700 people who've given me money through some sort of registry or multiple offender books is absurd. And the money that people give to you to run a campaign, I don't even know these people's names for a lot of the part, because I don't have time to look at all the money coming in. And we get a lot of small donations. This was not one, but I'm just saying we get a large number of donations, many small. And I don't see that. So to ask me to run around and apologize for monies that came in that we rejected when we found out about them is absurd. And it doesn't explain why Mr. Reisig is taking donations from police unions, police individuals, and over $100,000 has been put up on his behalf by CCPOA, which has no connection to what he does except when he produces jobs for them by doing in custody programs. And he's supposed to be the person who investigates police behavior. That's a real conflict of interest. Taking a small amount of money from someone who turns out to have a problem has absolutely no, that I'm going to, for $1,000 or a couple $1,000, try and get a sex molester out of trouble is the most absurd thing I've ever heard. So the fact that we go on talking about this months later is a tribute to Mr. Reisig's cleverness here, but it isn't an indication of anything that's going on in the campaign or anything that I have had to do. Mr. Reisig's continued ability to turn it around is sort of like his ability to say everybody who does well is his fault, and everybody who does poorly, like Mr. Pape, is somebody else's fault. And in this case, Mr. Pape's was known to be in on a mental health hold, and there was no reason that a prosecutor, if they were my prosecutors, they would not be going forward with cases with people known to be mentally ill, because just because a defense attorney doesn't want to endanger his client to get more time because of mental illness doesn't mean a prosecutor shouldn't be in there pitching for safety, which is what mental illness is, something we need to be considering.